At 8:03 a.m. on June 16, 1943, Captain Jay Zeamer held his B-17 steady at 25,000 feet over Buka Island as 16 Japanese Zero fighters climbed toward him from the airstrip below. The 24-year-old pilot had rebuilt this bomber from the boneyard 3 months earlier, the crew nobody else wanted, and today marked their most dangerous volunteer mission yet. A solo 1,200-mile photo-reconnaissance run that command had called suicidal. In the past 6 months, the Pacific Theater had lost 43 unescorted bombers over Japanese-held islands, with survival rates below 30%. Old 666 carried 9 men that morning. Zeamer's crew called themselves the Eager Beavers because they volunteered for every mission others refused. They'd taken a damaged B-17E that pilots considered cursed, stripped 2,000 pounds of weight, installed new engines, and mounted 19 50-caliber machine guns. The bomber now carried more firepower than any aircraft in the Pacific. But firepower meant nothing against impossible odds. 16 Japanese fighters were climbing at 3,000 feet per minute. The photo mapping run required Old 666 to hold course for 2 more minutes. No evasive maneuvers. 9 Americans, 600 miles from friendly airspace. Second Lieutenant Joseph Sarnosky crouched at the bombardier position in the nose. The 28-year-old had spent 18 months in the Pacific Theater flying combat missions. He'd earned the Silver Star 3 weeks earlier. His orders home were effective in 3 days. His bag sat packed at Port Moresby. He'd volunteered for this mission anyway because the crew needed an experienced bombardier to operate the cameras. The Japanese fighters reached 22,000 feet, 3,000 feet below, still climbing. Sarnosky checked his twin 50-caliber nose guns. The fixed gun that Zeamer could fire from the cockpit was ready. 16 fighters against 1 bomber. The mission started at 4 a.m. when Old 666 lifted off from Port Moresby, New Guinea. The Marines needed photographs of Bougainville's western coastline for a November invasion. They needed mapping photos of Empress Augusta Bay. But intelligence added a last-minute requirement. Photograph Buka Airfield first. The small island showed increased Japanese activity. 1 bomber. Solo. No escort. The P-38s didn't have the range. They arrived over Bougainville too early. No sunlight for mapping photos. They voted. Wait over ocean. Or photograph Buka first. They voted for Buka. The fighters reached 24,000 feet, 1,000 feet below. The first 5 broke formation and spread out. Frontal attack. Most B-17s had minimal nose armament. Old 666 carried 3 50-caliber guns in the nose. The Japanese didn't know that yet. Can 1 bomber survive 16 fighters over enemy territory? Please like to share this story, subscribe, and let's see what happens. Back to Zeamer. The 5 Zeros dove. Zeamer held steady. Cameras still running. 30 seconds left. The fighters closed at 700 miles per hour. At 600 yards, they opened fire. Sarnosky fired back. His twin 50s hammered. Zeamer triggered the nose gun. 3 guns converged on the lead Zero. The engine exploded. It rolled inverted. The other 4 kept coming. At 300 yards, shells hit the nose. Plexiglass shattered. 1 shell exploded in front of Sarnosky. The blast threw him backward. Blood poured from his neck and side. In the cockpit, shells blew holes through the floor. Zeamer's left leg erupted in pain. Shrapnel tore into both legs and wrist. The Zeros flashed past. 12 seconds. 1 fighter damaged, 1 bombardier dying, 1 pilot wounded, 15 fighters climbing. 600 miles from home. Navigator First Lieutenant Ruby Johnston crawled forward from his position. He saw Sarnosky beneath the catwalk. Blood pooled on the metal floor. The bombardier's neck wound pumped red with each heartbeat. Johnston pressed his hand against the gash, tried to stop the bleeding. Sarnosky pushed him away, pointed at the nose guns. Another wave was coming. Johnston looked up through the shattered plexiglass. 8 more Zeros were diving from 26,000 feet. They'd watched the first attack, learned from it, This time they weren't coming 5 abreast. They were coming in 2 waves, 4 from above, 4 from below. Bracket attack. Sarnowski dragged himself back to the bombardier position. Blood soaked his flight suit. He gripped the twin .50 caliber gun handles, swung the guns toward the incoming fighters. His hands shook. Vision blurred. He blinked. Focused. The lead Zero filled his gun sight. 600 yards, 500, 400. He fired. The twin .50s roared. Tracers walked up the Zero's nose. The fighter's canopy exploded. Glass and aluminum fragments spiraled away. The Zero rolled right and dove, smoking. Sarnowski shifted aim to the second fighter. Fired again. Rounds punched through the engine cowling. The Zero's propeller stopped. It fell away. In the cockpit, Zeamer fought to control the aircraft. His left rudder pedal was gone, destroyed by the 20mm shell. Blood filled his left boot. The leg wound was deep. Bone showed through torn flight suit fabric. His right wrist bled where shrapnel had sliced through. He couldn't feel his fingers properly. The control yoke felt slippery with blood. But he held course. The cameras were still running. The mapping photos of Empress Augusta Bay were critical. The Marines needed them. Without these photos, the November invasion would go in blind. Men would die on beaches they couldn't see from intelligence photos. He held steady. The 4 Zeros attacking from below came in at 19,000 feet. Ball turret gunner Staff Sergeant Forrest Dillman tracked them through his gun sight. The ball turret hung beneath the B-17's fuselage, a cramped sphere of plexiglass and steel. Dillman was 5'4", small enough to fit. He'd been manning this position for 6 months, flown 32 missions, never seen an attack like this. 4 fighters coming straight up from below. Most bombers couldn't defend the belly. Old 666 could. Dillman opened fire at 400 yards. His twin .50s hammered. The lead Zero pulled up hard, trying to break Dillman's aim. Rounds walked up the Zero's belly. The fuel tank erupted. Orange fireball at 18,000 feet. The other 3 scattered. The mapping run finished. Zeamer banked left, turned southwest, heading for Bougainville's western coastline, the main objective. 13 Japanese fighters were still up there, regrouping. Sarnowski slumped over his guns. Navigator Johnston checked for pulse. Found none. The bombardier had kept fighting for 4 minutes after the mortal wound. His heart had stopped. Johnston pulled the body away from the guns, took his position. Old 666 needed every gun man. Oxygen pressure gauges in the cockpit dropped to 0. The yellow oxygen tanks behind the cockpit had exploded when the 20mm shells hit. Every crew member now depended on small personal bottles. At 25,000 feet, those bottles lasted maybe 10 minutes. After that, hypoxia would set in. Confusion, loss of coordination, unconsciousness, death. Zeamer had a choice. Descend below 10,000 feet, where men could breathe without oxygen, or stay high and pass out. He chose to descend, but not yet. The cameras needed 3 more minutes to complete the Bougainville coastal mapping. 3 minutes at altitude, without oxygen. Co-pilot 2nd Lieutenant John Britton came to. He'd been knocked unconscious when the first shell hit the cockpit. Blood ran down the back of his head from a contusion. He looked at Zeamer, saw the pilot's left leg. The knee was destroyed, broken above and below. A hole the size of a fist gaped in the thigh. White bone fragments showed through shredded muscle. Zeamer's hands gripped the control yoke, knuckles white, face gray from blood loss. Britton reached for the controls. Zeamer shook his head. Not yet. Hold course. 2 more minutes. The 13 remaining Zeros regrouped at 27,000 feet, 2,000 feet above Old 666. They'd lost 3 aircraft, damaged 2 more. Against 1 bomber. The American aircraft was more heavily armed than intelligence had reported. The Japanese flight leader changed tactics. No more frontal attacks against that nose armament. Attack from the sides. The waist positions. Most B-17s in the Pacific had single guns in the waist. Easy targets. He didn't know Old 666 had twin .50s in both waist positions. Staff Sergeant George Kendrick manned the right waist gun. Sergeant Herbert Pugh had the left. Both men watched the Zeros form up, counted them. 13. Coming in from both sides simultaneously. 6 from the right, 7 from the left. Split attack. Force the gunners to choose targets. Overwhelm one side. Kendrick and Pugh had flown together for 8 months. They didn't need to communicate. They knew the drill. Kendrick took right side threats. Pugh took left. When fighters crossed over, they'd hand off targets. The Zeros dove. Kendrick opened fire at 500 yards. His twin 50s tracked the lead Zero on the right. Tracers converged. The Zero's wing root erupted. Fuel sprayed. The fighter rolled away, trailing fire. Kendrick shifted to the second fighter. Fired. Missed. The Zero was jinking, hard to track. He led the target. Fired again. Rounds walked across the Zero's fuselage. Cockpit glass shattered. The fighter snap-rolled left. Out of control. 2 down on the right side, 4 still coming. On the left, Pugh engaged his 7 targets. The first Zero came in fast. Too fast. Pugh held fire. Waited. The Zero's guns flashed. Rounds punched through old 666's fuselage. Pugh didn't flinch. He tracked the fighter. Led it. Fired at 300 yards. The Zero flew through his stream of fire. Engine smoking. It pulled up. Disappeared above. The cameras clicked off. Mapping complete. Zeamer shoved the control yoke forward. Old 666's nose dropped. The altimeter unwound. 24,000. 22,000. 20,000. The dive was steep. Necessary. The crew needed oxygen. But the Zeros were diving too. Chasing. At 15,000 feet, Zeamer pulled back. Leveled off. The air was breathable now. Crew members gasped. Sucked in oxygen. Their personal bottles had run dry minutes earlier. Some had been close to passing out. The dive had saved them. Radio operator Technical Sergeant Johnny Abel climbed out of the top turret. His left leg was bleeding. Shrapnel from the oxygen tank explosion had peppered his thigh. He ignored it. Checked on the other crew. The waist gunners were still firing. The tail gunner was alive. Ball turret operational. Navigator Johnston was manning Sarnowski's nose guns. Sarnowski's body lay beneath the catwalk, covered with a jacket. Abel climbed back into the top turret, swung the twin 50s toward the pursuing Zeros. They were coming again. The Japanese fighters had old 666 at a disadvantage now. The bomber was at 15,000 feet. Lower. Slower. The Zeros could dive from above with speed advantage. 8 fighters remained operational. The other 5 had been damaged or destroyed, but 8 was still enough. The flight leader organized them into 2 4-ship elements. One element would attack from the rear quarter, the other from the front quarter, force the bomber to defend 2 directions simultaneously. Classic pincer. It usually worked. Tail gunner Staff Sergeant William Vaughn saw them coming. 4 Zeros in trail formation. Diving from his 6 o'clock high position, they'd approach from behind and above, attack the tail, then pull up and away before the nose guns could engage. Standard tactic. Vaughn had seen it 30 times. He swung his twin 50s up, elevated the guns to maximum angle, waited. The Zeros opened fire at 600 yards, too far. Rounds fell short. Vaughn held his fire, saved ammunition. 500 yards, 400. The Zeros were committed now. Couldn't break off. Vaughn fired. Both 50s hammered. The lead Zero took hits across the engine. Smoke poured. It pulled up hard. Stalled. Fell away spinning. The other 3 scattered. The front element attacked simultaneously. 4 Zeros diving at the nose from 10 o'clock high. Johnston saw them. Swung Sarnowski's guns. The twin 50s were still warm from the last engagement. Still loaded. He fired at 500 yards, walked tracers toward the lead fighter. Missed. The Zero was fast, closing at 400 miles per hour. Johnston adjusted, led the target more, fired again. Hits! The Zero's cowling shredded. Pieces flew back, hit the canopy. The fighter pulled up trailing smoke. Old 666 shook from hits. 20mm shells punched through the left wing. Hydraulic fluid sprayed. The number 2 engine coughed. Ran rough. Zeamer checked the gauges. Oil pressure dropping. Cylinder head temperature rising. The engine was dying. He feathered the propeller, shut it down. 3 engines remaining. 600 miles still to go. The Japanese fighters broke off at 8:45 a.m., 42 minutes after the first attack. They'd lost 4 aircraft confirmed, 3 more heavily damaged. Their ammunition was depleted. Fuel gauges showed critical levels. The return flight to Buka was 30 miles. They couldn't continue. The flight leader waggled his wings, the signal to disengage. 7 remaining Zeros turned northeast, climbed away, left old 666 limping southwest over open ocean. Zeamer slumped in his seat. The adrenaline was fading. Pain rushed in to replace it. His left leg throbbed. Each heartbeat sent waves of agony through the shattered knee. His right wrist bled steadily. The gash was deep. He could see tendon. His flight suit was soaked red from waist to boots. Blood pooled on the cockpit floor, mixed with hydraulic fluid and spent brass casings. The smell was overwhelming. Copper and cordite and aviation fuel. Britain took the controls. Zeamer didn't resist this time. He leaned back, closed his eyes, stayed conscious through will alone. Behind the cockpit, the crew assessed damage. Old 666 had taken 187 bullet holes, 5 20mm cannon strikes. The nose plexiglass was gone. Wind screamed through the opening. The oxygen system was destroyed. Number 2 engine was shut down. Hydraulics were leaking. The radio was dead, hit during the first attack. They couldn't call for help, couldn't request emergency landing clearance. They were on their own. Port Moresby was still 500 miles southwest. 2 hours of flying time at reduced speed on 3 engines. Abel and Kendrick worked on Zeamer's leg. They'd pulled the first aid kit from its mount, found sulfa powder and bandages. The wound was too severe for field medicine. Bone was shattered. Arteries were severed. They packed the wound with gauze, wrapped it tight, applied pressure, slowed the bleeding. That was all they could do. Zeamer needed a surgeon. Soon, or he'd bleed out before they reached land. His pulse was weak, skin pale, lips blue. Shock was setting in. Johnston remained at the nose guns, scanning the sky for more fighters. The Japanese might send a second wave, fresh aircraft from Rabaul. It would take them 90 minutes to reach this area. Old 666 would be vulnerable the entire flight back. No radio, 1 engine down, wounded crew, easy target. But the fighters never came. The sky remained empty, just clouds and ocean below. The bomber droned southwest, alone. At 9:30 a.m., Britain spotted the New Guinea coastline. Land. They'd made it across the Solomon Sea. But Port Moresby was still 200 miles inland, over mountains, through weather. Old 666 was losing altitude. The 3 remaining engines couldn't maintain 15,000 feet. They were down to 12,000 now, sinking slowly. The mountains ahead were 7,000 feet high. They'd clear them. Barely. Zeamer opened his eyes. He didn't remember closing them. Britain was still flying. The coastline was behind them now. Jungle below, mountains ahead. The Owen Stanley Range. 7,000 feet of rock and trees between Old 666 and home. Zeamer checked the altimeter. 11,500 feet. Dropping. He looked at the engine gauges. Number 2 was still feathered. Dead. Number 1 was running hot. Cylinder head temperature in the red. Oil pressure fluctuating. That engine wouldn't last much longer. If it failed, they'd have 2 engines. Not enough power to clear the mountains. They'd have to ditch in the jungle. Nobody survived jungle crashes. The weather closed in at 10,000 feet. Clouds wrapped around the bomber. Visibility dropped to 0. Britain was flying on instruments. Compass heading, airspeed, altitude, rate of climb. The bomber shuddered through turbulence. Rain hammered the fuselage. Lightning flashed in the clouds. Thunder rolled. Old 666 descended through 9,000 feet. The mountains were somewhere ahead in the clouds. Britain couldn't see them. He flew the heading. Trusted the compass. Hoped the mountains were behind them. At 9,500 feet, they broke through the clouds. Clear air below. Mountains all around. The Owen Stanleys. Jagged peaks covered in jungle. Old 666 was in a valley. Mountains rose on both sides, higher than the bomber. Britain banked right. Followed the valley southwest. looking for a pass through the range. The altimeter read 9,000 feet now, still dropping. Number 1 engine was failing. Temperature gauge pegged. The engine was cooking itself. Britain reduced power, babied it, tried to keep it running. They needed every bit of thrust. Kendrick came forward, told Britain about Zeamer. The pilot was unconscious, pulse barely detectable, breathing shallow. He'd lost too much blood. Hours had passed since the wound. The bandages were soaked through. Nothing more they could do. Zeamer needed blood transfusions, surgery. They had minutes, maybe less. Britain pushed the throttles forward, risked the engines. Speed was more important than caution now. The valley opened ahead. Port Moresby lay beyond the next ridge, 30 miles. Britain climbed, aimed for the lowest saddle between peaks, 8,000 feet. Old 666 struggled upward, 700 feet per minute climb rate. Normally it climbed at 1,000. The damaged bomber was at its limit. The ridge approached. Old 666 cleared it by 300 feet. Trees flashed below. Then the valley opened. Port Moresby appeared ahead. 7-mile airstrip. Home. Britain keyed the radio. Dead. Still dead. He couldn't call the tower. Couldn't request emergency landing. He'd have to go straight in. Hope the runway was clear. Hope the tower saw them coming. Saw the damage. Understood. He dropped the landing gear. The hydraulics groaned. Gear came down. Locked. Flaps next. They deployed partially. Hydraulic pressure was too low for full extension. The approach would be fast. Too fast. But there was no choice. Old 666 crossed the airfield boundary at 140 miles per hour. 30 miles per hour too fast. Britain held the nose up, bled off speed. The main wheels touched, bounced, touched again, stayed down. He reversed the propellers, applied brakes. The bomber rolled down the runway, slowing. The end of the runway approached. 2,000 feet left. 1,000. 500. Old 666 stopped with 200 feet of runway remaining. Britain shut down the engines. The propellers windmilled. Stopped. Silence descended. After 8 hours of engine noise and gunfire and wind screaming through the shattered nose, the silence was overwhelming, almost painful. Ground crew ran toward the bomber. They'd seen it approach, seen the damage, the missing plexiglass, the feathered engine, the bullet holes covering every surface. They knew it was bad. The crew door opened. Abel climbed out first, then Kendrick, then Pugh, then Vaughn, then Dillman, then Johnston. 6 men, still moving, still alive. Blood-soaked, exhausted, but alive. The ground crew chief climbed aboard, looked inside, saw the blood pooled on the cockpit floor, saw Zeamer slumped in the pilot seat, saw the covered body beneath the catwalk in the nose. He climbed back out quickly, told the medics waiting below, "Get the pilot last, he's dead." The medics carried Zeamer out on a stretcher. His face was gray, lips blue, no visible movement. Britain climbed down behind them, grabbed the lead medic's arm, told him, "The pilot's not dead, check him." The medic stopped, set the stretcher down, checked for pulse, found one, weak, thread-like, barely there, but present. They ran for the ambulance, loaded Zeamer, drove to the field hospital at full speed, wheels throwing up dust. The doctors gave him 1 chance in 10, maybe less. He'd lost more than half his blood volume, both legs shattered, multiple fractures above and below the left knee, right wrist tendon severed, dozens of shrapnel wounds across both arms and torso, severe shock. His body temperature had dropped to 94 degrees. They started transfusions immediately. 4 units, then 6, then 8. Began surgery. Worked for 6 hours straight. Reconstructed the knee. Repaired the arteries. Saved his life. Johnston led the ground crew to Sarnowski's body. They carried it out carefully, respectfully, laid it on a stretcher, covered it with a clean sheet. The bombardier had died at his guns, kept fighting with a mortal wound, shot down 2 Zeros after the blast that should have killed him instantly, after his neck was torn open, after his side was ripped apart. He'd crawled back to his position, fired until his heart stopped, saved the mission, saved the crew, protected the nose while dying. He was supposed to go home in 3 days, back to Pennsylvania, back to his wife Marie, back to his family of 17 siblings. Now he was going home in a casket. A hero, but dead. The ground crew chief walked around old 666 slowly, counted the damage methodically. 187 bullet holes, 5 20mm cannon strikes, each one capable of destroying a fighter. Nose completely destroyed, oxygen system destroyed, radio destroyed, number 2 engine destroyed, hydraulics severely damaged, flight controls damaged, left wing spar cracked, tail section peppered with holes. He looked at the surviving crew members, asked the question, "How many fighters attacked you?" Britain said, 16, maybe 17. They came in waves. The crew chief shook his head, didn't believe it. Nobody could survive 16 fighters alone. Not possible. He climbed inside the bomber, saw the blood covering every surface, saw the thousands of spent brass casings rolling across the floor, saw the torn metal, the shattered instruments, the destroyed equipment. He believed it then. He'd never seen anything like it. In 18 months in the Pacific Theater, he'd never seen a bomber take this much damage and survive. The photographs old 666 captured that day were developed within hours. Intelligence officers studied them carefully. The Buka airfield photos showed 16 aircraft on the ground, confirmed the Japanese buildup. The Bougainville coastal mapping photos were perfect. Every beach, every reef, every approach to Empress Augusta Bay. Exactly what the Marines needed. On November 1st, 1943, 4 months after Zeamer's mission, the 3rd Marine Division landed at Empress Augusta Bay. They used the photos from old 666 to plan every detail: the landing zones, the approach routes, the defensive positions. The invasion succeeded. American forces secured Bougainville. The photos captured by a dying bombardier and a bleeding pilot saved hundreds of Marine lives, maybe thousands. Zeamer spent 15 months in hospitals, 7 surgeries on his left leg, 3 on his right wrist, physical therapy for a year. He learned to walk again, slowly, painfully. The knee never healed properly. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life. But he lived. On January 16, 1944, 7 months after the mission, General Henry Arnold presented Zeamer with the Medal of Honor in a ceremony at Walter Reed Hospital. Zeamer was still in a wheelchair, still recovering. His parents stood beside him. His mother cried. His father saluted. 2 weeks earlier, on December 17, 1943, Sarnowski had been awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. His widow Marie received it at a ceremony in Pennsylvania. She held the medal, looked at it, then gave it to Sarnowski's parents. They placed it in a glass case, next to his silver star, next to his air medal, next to the photograph of their son in his bombardier uniform, smiling, alive. The other 7 crew members received the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. Britton, Johnston, Abel, Kendrick, Pugh, Vaughn, Dillman, all 7. It remains the most highly decorated single air mission in American history. 9 men, 2 Medals of Honor, 7 Distinguished Service Crosses, 5 Purple Hearts. No other crew has ever been honored like this. Not before, not since. Old 666 was repaired, returned to service, flew 18 more missions, then was retired in March 1944. Flown back to the United States, used as a training aircraft, finally scrapped in August 1945. The nose plexiglass was never properly fixed. Crews who flew it later said they could still see bullet holes patched with aluminum, still see the bloodstains on the floor. The bomber had become a legend. Zeamer survived the war, returned to MIT, earned a master's degree in aeronautical engineering, worked in the aerospace industry for 30 years, married, had children, retired to Boothbay Harbor, Maine, the place where he'd spent summers as a child, building boats, sailing. He died on March 22, 2007, age 88. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Section 34. Grave 809. The headstone reads, Lieutenant Colonel Jay Zeamer Jr. Medal of Honor. Old 666. That's the story of the cursed bomber that became the most decorated aircraft in American history. The crew that volunteered for a suicide mission. The pilot who flew 8 hours with shattered legs. The bombardier who died at his guns. If you felt something watching this story, please hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten heroes with more people who need to hear them. Subscribe so you never miss another story like this. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Thanks for keeping these memories alive. We'll see you in the next video.